Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Heather Fletcher. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at PhiX Technologies. I'm your host for the session today. Firstly, thanks so much for joining us. I know calendars are packed, particularly after, for many, a holiday period. So we're here to make this time valuable over the next 45 minutes. Quick intros to PhiX, who we are. We're a deep domain, revenue cloud and industries partner. We're really proud to say that we're a member of the Partner Advisory Board. What does that mean? Globally, when you make an investment on the Salesforce platform, you also have access to about 5,000 partners, those who implement or embed or extend other solutions onto the platform that you've invested in. We have the privilege of having early access to much of that technology, all of the technology in the Revenue Cloud stack and the Revenue Cloud Advanced and billing and all that good stuff, which means that we get to develop accelerators, and our developers, senior, junior alike, and our lab team get to plug and play and have really deep domain experience with those solutions before they're launched to market for customers. That's just one way Salesforce ensure that when they're launching new products to customers, that there's an ecosystem of partners like ourselves to support you on your journey. So right now, in terms of the webinar, there's a lot of conversation in the Salesforce ecosystem around Revenue Cloud. Not just around new product features or packaging, but about how companies can build a smarter, more scalable quote-to-cash operation and experience on Salesforce. So today isn't about a one-size-fits-all approach or pushing a particular pathway to you. It's about how can you get more from your existing investment, whether that's CPQ, former Stillbricks, Velocity, billing, industry clouds, or indeed planning your move to Revenue Cloud Advanced. We're going to cover all of that on this call. So our goal is to help you make informed, confident decisions about how to evolve as a business, whether that's optimizing what you already have or preparing for something more transformational. We'll share real-world examples, in fact, what we're building here on Agentforce with PhiX, and give you a glimpse of what's possible with Revenue Cloud Advanced so that you can see where the platform's heading and how it might serve your future needs. So on the agenda, here's what you can expect. First, we'll kick off with a fireside chat around where Revenue Cloud is heading and what that means for you and your teams. You'll also see what's possible in Revenue Cloud Advanced and how customers are already evolving on that platform. And finally, we'll wrap with how to assess your current landscape and decide what to prioritize based upon where you and your business and your evolution of your business is. So before we get into the conversation, you'll see on the screen, we've got a couple of people along with me. So Michael, do you want to share a quick bit around your role, what you focus on at Salesforce, please?
Thanks so much, Heather. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Raja. I'm Senior Director of Revenue Cloud Product Management. I'm based in Manchester in the UK. So for those of you who are joining in Europe, I'm in a very similar time zone to you. My job essentially allows me to engage with customers, with partners, and our internal stakeholders in understanding what their needs are, and ultimately bringing that back into our engineering team and making sure that we're delivering what our customers are asking for. So a real sort of sharp point in terms of voice of customer. And then my personal experience, I've been in the space for 13 years. Thereabouts now, working across different solution providers as well as system integrators. So yeah, lovely to meet you all.
Thanks very much, Michael. And Tundi, for those who haven't met you yet, would you briefly introduce your background and what you're leading here with us at PhiX Technologies?
Super. Thanks, Heather. So hi, everyone. My name is Tundi Musaku. I'm a Chief Strategy Officer at PhiX Technologies, fresh in seat, but I have a kind of tenured background in the Salesforce industry. So I've got over 15 years consulting experience. I'm a Salesforce certified technical architect, one of the very few in the world. And right here at PhiX, we're responsible for a lot of what we do to drive our solutions and innovations for our customers, responsible for expanding our solution offering and seeing the power of the Salesforce platform and other complementary technologies used to full power for customer success and customer value. Nice to be speaking to you today. Look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Tundi. And so as mentioned earlier, we're here to talk about how to get the most out of the existing quote-to-cash investment and how to recognize when it might be time to evolve. It's not about pushing a product. It's about helping you maximize value, reduce manual effort and co-create what's next. In terms of how it's going to flow for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to ask Michael around 6 or 7 questions. Probably 80% of those have come in from you yourselves as customers who've registered for this webinar. If we've got time at the end, after we've covered a little bit more around Agentforce and the ecosystem with Tundi, we've got some additional questions which have come in this morning from new attendees as well. Let's start straight away. So in terms of current landscape, Michael, let's start with that. So many Salesforce customers have invested strongly in CPQ and billing managed package. And we know these tools are powering some incredibly complex businesses. So as customers' expectations evolve, we're seeing this at about 80 of the conversations we're having, and organizations are continuing to grow. Where do teams look to streamline, to simplify, or scale more effectively?
Great question. When I engage with customers, there's a few things that, if you've had the misfortune of being in a meeting with me, there's a few things that I tend to say over and over again. One of those things is the easiest way to increase your revenue is to make it easier for your customers to buy from you, right? So when looking at streamlining, it's often a great idea to take a look at your offering. So your products, your services, third-party catalogs, and so forth, and look at how your customers want to engage you. Right. So I think that's incredibly important, and making sure that you are equipped to sell your customers your products and services in a manner in which they are prepared to buy. So, for example, we've seen statistics that say that customers would prefer a low touch, no touch sales experience if it's a very straightforward offering. Right. So is there a way for you to look at taking what you have today, so that's your product catalog, your pricing, et cetera, and making that available in an e-commerce or a customer self-serve type experience, for example? It may not necessarily be a technical downscaling, but rather helping you meet your customers where they need to be. So that's one area that I would say would be really important to look at. The other thing is also just taking a look at where you're, again, from a data standpoint, looking at, is there a way of consolidating information where you can potentially manage them in a single location? That's a really good idea, especially for global organizations that tend to have disparate processes and ways to go to market. If you can consolidate that and manage all of that in one place, that certainly reduces overhead, and certainly a good area for organizations to look at streamlining and making lives easier for them.
Terrific. Thanks very much. I think if we come on to the next slide as well, I think the natural follow on that really is looking at maximizing your existing investments. And so as a follow on from that, Michael, for teams already live on CPQ or billing and not planning any more big projects yet, because there's a lot of sunken costs there already, where do you see the biggest opportunity to unlock value from what they've already built?
Amazing question. So again, it's one of those things that I tend to say rather often. We've got a lot of what I call level 1 quote to cash implementations all over the world. And what I mean by that is organizations have a big vision of what they would like to achieve when they start a project like this, so sales transformation, digitization projects. And then a lot of it gets constrained by budget, by timelines, by external factors. And so what they end up doing is they release what's called a minimum viable. Some are lucky and they get a minimum lovable product or a solution out there. And these projects, they tend to be pretty chunky. So they involve integrations, they involve changing the ways that you engage your customers, so integrating a new go-to-market proposition and so forth. So what companies do is they go out, do what they need to do to get on the platform, but then it's not evolved. So I think it's a great opportunity for those organizations that have made the investment, whether that's CPQ, whether that's CLM, whether that's some sort of order management, order orchestration capabilities. Time to revisit all those great ideas that you had during discovery, all those things that you wish you could do that ended up in the cutting room floor. Is a great time to go back and say, hey, can we get to a level 1.5? Can we get to a level 2 implementation now? And even the simplest things like making a new price model available might increase your revenue, might increase your customer count. The smallest change could make the biggest difference in your revenue and your profitability. So that would be my sort of go-to piece of advice, right? So go back and take a look at all the things that you wish you did first time around and try and implement that. You've already got the technology, you've made the investment. Now time to go ahead and increase that.
I love that answer. I think also what we see probably more often than not, and increasingly over the last few years, is where customers have made that investment, particularly if they've been Salesforce users for a number of years, they love it. They love the platform, they get curious, they try and explore more and try and invent more. So they're always hungry for doing things differently in a more agile way as well. So that for us, as an implementation partner and as advisory partner, is what we see. So customers are driving that change, which for us is great, and it's really exciting as well. That sort of operational and optimizational efforts, we're also seeing the Salesforce platform continue to evolve, as I've mentioned there. One of the most talks about development right now is Revenue Cloud Advanced. Some people are already calling it RCA, but it's Revenue Cloud Advanced. And Michael, can you walk us through what Revenue Cloud Advanced is and how it's reshaping the way some companies are thinking about quote to cash?
Absolutely. I think we may have a slide on that. Thank you so much. First thing to note, Revenue Cloud is far wider in terms of its capability than Salesforce CPQ and Salesforce billing. So you can see here from the slide that we've got prepared, it's designed to be a one-stop shop for you to manage your products and your pricing. We understand, and this is coming from customer feedback, right? So we've got thousands of customers. We're very fortunate to have so many customers running their quote to cash process on our technology. So we've got lots of feedback where customers tend to have multiple ERPs. They tend to have multiple spreadsheets. They tend to have PIM solutions. Data's everywhere, right? And so when you speak to business leaders, they say that's not necessarily going to go away, but it would be great for Salesforce to be the hub or the nexus to pull out all of this information in one place so that all the different teams from all across the globe can work in a similar fashion. And then any frameworks or underpinnings or business rules that you create are all managed in one place. Then naturally, you've got the CPQ part of the process. So your ability to search through your offerings, assemble said offerings, be able to price them accurately, be able to own a negotiation process, whether that's internal or external, through an approval process within that solution, and ultimately be able to compose that into a document that can be executed by your customer. So that's an expected piece of capability. And then contracting, not new to Salesforce necessarily, but new as a single offering within Revenue Cloud. So we help our customers by ensuring that the commercial negotiation as well as the legal negotiation can happen at the same time. So that helps with shortening sales cycles. So you're not having to go through a commercial negotiation, everyone's happy, and then you get the lawyers involved and it takes another month, right? Not that I'm saying that lawyers are bad. They're really good. But then once you've got your contract information and your commercial information in one place, that helps you create the perfect order. You've got all the data necessary in your order. You can also do things such as order decomposition. So if you've got a sales bill of material, you need to break it down into things that you can fulfill. You can do that with our order management capability. We also have order fulfillment capability as well, which is to say that we can bring in signals, status information from other systems. So say you've got something that needs to be delivered, whether or not it actually arrived on the customer site, for example, if that information is sitting locked in an ERP or some sort of delivery solution, you can use the Revenue Cloud APIs to bring that information into Salesforce and make it more visible to more users. And ultimately, when you have contracts and orders information, then you're able to create the perfect asset. And once you have the asset information inside of Salesforce, you can then manage the whole life cycle within Salesforce. And so that's to say things like renewal, uplifts, cancellations, anything associated with the life cycle of a product or service can be managed there. And then naturally, you're able to collect as well. So we've got a capability called invoice management inside of Revenue Cloud Advanced, but also something to consider if you want more advanced capability. We also have Revenue Cloud billing as well. And that was announced as of the spring 25 release, which came out in February. We're very close to our summer release now, so a lot more exciting things to talk to you about very soon. But this allows our customers to do billing and invoicing in a far more mature manner. And the two capabilities that we're really proud of that we launched is the ability to do usage management and the ability to do milestone billing as part of the Revenue Cloud billing capabilities. And some of those things, as you can see, there is also roadmap items. More importantly, all of these capabilities, as expansive as it is also built on what we call core, which is to say it sits on the same platform as Sales Cloud and Service Cloud. So there's some performance benefits to gain as well. And then ultimately is also sitting on a bit of API. So it's an API first design. So it's a very modern design that is designed to be composable using just-in-time architecture. So our customers can now modularize Revenue Cloud, we can actually serve up, for example, pricing within a commerce experience, for example, without having to bring the entire application along for the journey, right? So you can provide the right information at the right time, making it very agile, making it very easy for businesses to chop and change and move as markets change, as we know with recent events. So that's hopefully a good overview of what Revenue Cloud is.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I think the graphics covers that as well. And I think on the next question, if that's okay with you, I'm going to probably talk a little bit about our experience here at PhiX as well, and our current experience with some existing Revenue Cloud advanced partners who we're implementing as we speak. So naturally, what comes on from that is, what does a migration look like? What does that shift actually look like, that redeployment? For teams exploring Revenue Cloud Advanced, they're asking, is it migration? Is it a rebuild? Is it something entirely new? And I think certainly the conversations we're having, and we're being obviously really transparent with customers, is we call this a refactor. It's not a lift and shift, and every instance is going to be different. And the nuances involved obviously dictate that. So if you consider, if you're an existing Stillbricks or Velocity customer today, you have to consider not just the iterations of the versions of software or the ERP or the systems that you're integrating into, but how those were developed and put together. What was the competency at that time of your in-house developers with Apex, with JavaScript, as opposed to what it's going to be in the future as well? There's no one single deployment pattern. There's no one iteration or one version in any instance there of the ERPs that you're using as well. But what we're seeing is, yes, it's a bespoke one-on-one conversation, but in many cases, certainly in the early doors of some of the opportunities we've been working on with customers, they're not as complex as we initially thought. There are some great opportunities out there to buy some ready-made accelerated tooling. So Prodly, Idea Helix, great tools out there. However, what we are seeing in-house is a lot of customers still have the capabilities to do that themselves. And so what we will do is work with them and say, okay, from host to post, in unison with your customer 360 from Salesforce, what does that look like? And so we can work with them to map out a really simple, scalable implementation and deployment pattern. We had a webinar last week with a German customer, a German utility customer, and they experienced exactly that with their implementation. It was very hand by hand, sprint by sprint, iteration by iteration, and using common sense and making the most of their in-house efficiencies as well as the hand-holding of the partner team. Last night, probably a good example, I managed to join a call, quite a late call, with one of our US customers where we're implementing quite a large-scale Revenue Cloud advanced deployment at the moment with billing. They were loving all the features. You mentioned DRO, you mentioned some of the pricing configuration nuances, and that was revolutionary for them now because they'd got so used to working in one way, they hadn't come up for air to experience what the new possibilities of Revenue Cloud Advanced are. We were really excited at that, and everyone, certainly on the PhiX side, came off that call really stoked and really pleased as well. So I'm not sure if you'd like to add anything to that, either Michael or Tundi, around what that shift involves, but that's certainly, if you like, the six pennies from PhiX side of things as it stands.
I'll go first if you don't mind, Tunde. I think you've covered a lot there, and it's really good. The only couple of things I might add is, number one, from a Salesforce standpoint, if Salesforce CPQ and Salesforce billing is working for you, great. If you haven't seen any new features, functions on the Revenue Cloud side that you see would be revolutionary for you, you're welcome to stay on your existing solution, continue getting value out of the licensings that you currently have. Salesforce is absolutely not here to force anybody off onto a different platform. So if you're happy with the solution that you have, great. And just to echo some of the things you mentioned, Heather, there are a lot of tools, there's a lot of methodologies on how you can migrate from one solution to another or refactor from one solution to another. But definitely make that decision on a case-by-case basis, and definitely leverage your partners, in this case, PhiX, right? If you have a relationship with PhiX, definitely give them a shout, and they'll be able to help and guide you on not only what tools might be best, but also what journey do you want to take. Perhaps you might want to, now that you've learned what you learned from the initial implementation, are there things that you might want to do differently a second time around or a third time around, right? So there's definitely a conversation to be had. And so definitely my advice and guidance would be talk to your partners and get them to help you with this journey.
Thanks, Michael. And Tundi, if you're able to go a few slides back, slide in there to talk around a health check. And that really dovetails into what Michael said there. So the next steps for customers would be this one here. We offer you customers with Salesforce CPQ, complimentary health check. What does that mean? We will look under the hood of your existing systems, understand what you want to keep, what you're thinking you may want to retire, but ultimately, which of the new features on Revenue Cloud Advanced most appeal to you, and will work with you on a pathway which is digestible for your existing systems and your existing people, more importantly as well. So question 5, here we go, we're rattling through these. So who is it right for? So if we take a step back from moving from the mechanics of moving to Revenue Cloud Advanced, let's talk about fit. So not every business is in the same place. And I think you've touched upon this already, Michael. And we know this has to be aligned with business priorities. So what kind of companies or business models is Revenue Cloud Advanced best suited for? And I guess an extension to that is, what are the key things that teams should consider when evaluating whether it's the right step for them?
Yeah. I think what we're seeing right now with the number of customers that are going on a journey with Revenue Cloud with Salesforce, and the numbers in the hundreds. So we're, again, very humbled by, again, so many of our customers choosing to trust their quote-to-cash business process with Salesforce's technology. We're seeing a smorgasbord of customers, right? So we're seeing ones from sub 50 users all the way to customers that have thousands and thousands of users. And we're also seeing all sorts of interesting industries suddenly making a bigger appearance, right? In industries or verticals that Salesforce would have maybe not traditionally seen customers, we're starting to see more and more interest and people starting to go on a journey with us. And I think the reason why they're doing that is because they're starting to see that use cases or capabilities that was previously locked away behind whatever it was, whether that's their own business process or whether that's technological limitations, seem to be a lot easier to overcome with Revenue Cloud. But there are some common themes. We're seeing that customers who really want to activate a multi-channel / omni-channel experience are ones that are really interested in Revenue Cloud, are starting to start with proof of concepts or pilot projects with us because of that API first design, right?
Yeah.
So you're now able to suddenly go from, hey, having a conversation with a customer, being able to make them an offering, and then having that customer continue that life cycle by amending and renewing a subscription, for example. We're also seeing customers who maybe want to activate new pricing models in a way that's a little bit more convenient and fluid. So things like activating not only a subscription model, but alongside that, a usage-based model as well. You're now able to surface the information up into another CMS, or you can use Experience Cloud, or you can use B2B commerce. Lots of flexibility now because it's sitting on a bed of APIs, and really granular APIs as well. You can get quite detailed in what exactly you want to send across. So that is definitely a big theme we're seeing with customers who want to make a transition to Revenue Cloud. It's the omni-channel, multi-channel experiences that the API first capability gives customers with Revenue Cloud.
That's a really comprehensive answer, and I agree with you. And I think a lot of that comes also, certainly what we're seeing, down to the data and what the MDM piece, what the data, master data management pieces as well, because that flows into that. And I think I'm just conscious we've got a couple of minutes left on this side, and I'm going to ask you one final question, which I think ties in really nicely, because probably question 7, you've covered most of the nuance of that throughout where we've gone to. So in terms of a natural way to land is signals of readiness. So in your experience, Michael, what are some signs that a business might be ready to move from optimizing their existing platform, where we started this conversation, to a wider shift to Revenue Cloud Advanced? Is it about complexity, scaling into new regions? Is it shifting sort of business models, or something else?
I think all of those things are really good points to consider. Hey, maybe we want to try something new.
Yeah.
Also, for me, and going back to one of my isms, right? When you install capabilities like this in your business, they should be like a sandbox. You should have your sellers, whether they're technical, whether they're commercial focused, your operations people, go in there and work the way they want, but you still have boundaries of which they need to operate in. What you don't want is a straitjacket, right?
Yeah.
So that makes people want to go out of the system. They're going to start breaking rules. They're going to start going direct to X, Y, and Z. And so if you've taken what you've currently got, and that could be anything, whether that's a sales motion, whether that's reporting, whether that's operational, and you're starting to stretch the edges a little bit, and you feel that, hey, we've taken this as far as we can go, that's a really good signal. Over and above everything that you've just said, Heather, right? Those are really good points. But I think once your existing quote-to-cash solution starts to feel like a straitjacket, Especially, and it's not limited to commercial as well, right? Like you can talk about billing and invoicing as well. Is it flexible? Are your customers able to get the information that they need? Are they querying the invoices that they're getting? Do you have your days of sales outstanding getting longer? Again, all of these things are really useful signals. But if I were to summarize it in a single sort of sentence, I would say if your system's starting to feel like a straitjacket as opposed to a sandbox, that's probably a really good signal, and it's time for you to maybe explore something different. And in this case, maybe look at what Revenue Cloud can offer you.
Perfect. I think that's a terrific segue. Thanks for covering that. I think you've covered that really nicely. And I think we've given hopefully a very clear and practical point of view on what happens next. So now let's have a look at what that vision translates to in terms of automation and day-to-day execution. So I'm going to pass over to Tundi, maybe some more isms, Tundi, I don't know, and to talk around Agentforce as well. I'm going to put myself on mute for a bit. There we go.
Thank you, Heather.
You
hear me okay? Brilliant. I saw the thumb, I didn't hear anything. I think just to touch on a couple of things that I think Michael mentioned already, which is important about what we're discussing with Revenue Cloud specifically, and what we're seeing, at least from I'm a more, I guess, more technical than business, I think, and itself lends itself to the beauty of the solution now on core and how interconnected you can now get with everything else. So the elements I think you mentioned around extending commerce, extending field service, you mentioned DRO earlier with the customer that we work with right now. And of course, those are things where if, for example, part of the fulfillment of an order is an installation, that information does need to leave Salesforce now. You can fulfill all of that on Salesforce because that installation is then a service request that goes out to an engineer in field service. And in the delivery of that installation, for example, if the engineer needs a part, then the engineer can come back from field service, leveraging the Revenue Cloud APIs to order the part for the customer to make sure they're getting the right pricing, the right approvals, and there's no revenue leakage in that sense. So I'm excited, I think, to delve into this evolution of the lead to cash, quote to cash domain that we're talking about, talking around Agentforce, looking at today the competitive landscape, achieving operational excellence, maximizing revenue velocity. You need that element of automation thing that you talk about. And Agentforce in this context, at least in the way Salesforce is pushing it, which is quite important, is a big paradigm shift towards intelligent event-driven automation across the entire revenue stream. So I'll bring back up the slide, I think that Michael shared earlier, and just talk to a little bit of things that are there in terms of what agents are solving within that revenue space right now from lead to cash. So you look at things like catalog management, things like being able to do quotes or quote creation, leveraging the APIs that we just discussed, configuration rules engines, dynamically assembling those accurate quotes, quote summaries, quote emails, ensuring consistency, product selection, programmatically evaluating all those complexities in pricing matrices, bringing all that to bear so that all of the extra effort that a human would normally take is taken away with the leveraging of the agentic layer. You're maintaining your adherence to any rules that you have, data consistency, and then even driving things around the product catalog and price books. Michael touched on this earlier as well around automation, automated approvals. So looking at workflow, process automation, robust workflow rules, specifically orchestrating if you need hierarchies. So you'd have within organizations who's meant to approve this particular deal based on a particular granularity. Is it the quote amount, the discounting percentage, the type of deal specifically? Those are all the leverages that you have to drive that kind of approval about the agents. And Salesforce, I guess, you can even extend that on Slack. So where you have operations and organizations work within the Slack space, they don't need to come into Salesforce to handle any approval. The agent's also interacting with them within Slack. That way you have that element of timely routine, taking out bottlenecks as much as you can, and then everything is logged. So we all know what happened. There's an audit trail and there's compliance-based logging as well. We move over to billing, looking at invoicing, systems integration specifically. It used to be outside of Salesforce with the billing piece, but as discussed now, you're bringing a lot of that onto platform. So you have a bit more precision around your billing. I know we have a couple of agents on the PhiX side. We've looked at one specifically for billing, driving the removal or elimination of revenue leakage. So you're integrating with your billing systems via API if you need to, being able to generate invoices on finalized orders, ensuring that the terms of the contract, which we've looked at earlier in terms of the CLM, those are all specific and those are all accurate. That way you don't have any infrequencies. You're picking up on whatever rules from a tax perspective. If there are any specific payment gateways that the customer is using, and you're ensuring that element of accuracy in your invoice generation. Downstream systems reconciliation is also accurate. And then whatever for, if there is a need to, it's also extendable to complex batch processes. So you have either real-time eventing or complex batch processes. Both ways you're covered. And at the end of the day, you have this element of accuracy in your charging. You don't need to go off and customers aren't querying their bills, or you don't need to go back and apologize. It's just all of those things that are normal problems. And then wrap to close out with the RevRec, if you will, revenue recognition, compliance automation. The rules engine is quite cool. And then it's getting better as well in terms of the configuration with the advanced kind of rules engine, specifically for configuration. You can align that with accounting standards if you need to within your organization. All of your performance obligations, all of those things around contract elements, terms, delivery schedules, those you can now automate specifically. So you can have RevRec schedules. Michael mentioned that earlier as well with your general ledger systems. So those are all things that we see are super important. Looking at even further, let me see, something else to add, maybe even around assets management or ordering. The typical one that we've seen a lot is, where is my order? You get that all the time. Where is my order? Simple question, right? From a customer. But then it could be a 2-hour call and no one knows where it is. But you're able to solve that because you have Agentforce and Data Cloud underpinning it. What I like, I'm a technologist, and I love data. I love the questions that data kind of poses beyond the answers it asks. Because a lot of the time when you look at your data, it doesn't just give you answers. It also asks questions of you. Why are we doing things this way? If you put a dashboard in front of an exec, the first thing they ask is, what is that blob? And they say, oh, this is the reason. And I go, oh, why do we do that? Then you see that's driving like business change, business behavior. So being able to surface all that information and being able to surface that intelligence and then put that, even layering that with the agentic layer, that empowers, I think, the organization to do more, to see more, and to be more. I've seen, I think something that's worth kind of throwing up in the Salesforce world is this industry API library, which is quite powerful. It's tons and tons of use cases. I did a highlight of a few of them, I think, that touch on what we're talking about today with revenue, but you can see this anywhere. Asset warranty, being able to summarize that, something around RFP management, because now you can do your contract lifecycle management and terms on there, on the platform, upselling, cross-selling, recommendations, all of those things you have without needing to worry too much. Offer margin analysis. So should we offer this or should we offer that? And then based on that, does it need approval or not? All of those things you can bring into your agentic layer and be able to extend. Summaries of client relationships. What else did I pick out on here? Servicing of assets. And I think one thing else I also thought about that I know we have, if people on the call, we call it PhiX Flix, play on words with Netflix. And the idea is our YouTube channel where we push out some information. So there are a couple of agents that we have on there in generating invoices. You can see the invoice agent, we have a billing agent as well. I think something that's coming on the back of that is a renewals agent as well. So this element of like subscription-based and usage-based, when should I go after the customer to get them to renew? Who do I go after specifically that are at risk of attrition? All of those things that are driving what you need to do within the revenue space is super critical for how we leverage the platform, we leverage what we do, and how we support our customers. In closing out, specifically over here, wrapping out, it isn't, we don't see Agentforce over here just around automating tasks. It's more around architecting an intelligent, and in my, I guess, if you allow me, like an adaptive revenue engine that just allows the customer to grows with the customer, if you will, is the way I see it. You're doing all this leveraging of advanced AI techniques. We all know AI, ML, seamless orchestration, getting efficiency. So those are all things that I think there's powers. So you can have, from a customer perspective, more proactive decision-making, and then before that, revolutionize how we manage and grow revenue as a particular customer. Okay. So Heather, I think pass back to you just to talk around like what we do specifically in PhiX. I know we have a few offerings for a customer.
We do. Thanks, Tundi. And I think that's a really good segue. I think something you pointed out at the beginning of your segment as well which ties in to Michael's presentation, which is really for existing customers. The great thing is with Agentforce, you've got Einstein 1, you have access to the agents. For Revenue Cloud Advanced, you have access to the agents. So Salesforce have done a great job at ensuring you're covering both corners of the square there, so to speak. What we are seeing on the slide in front of you here, you'll see in terms of how to get started with PhiX on agents. The slide before from Tundi was brilliant because there's use cases, because as a business, you'll be saying, we see this a lot, customers ping us straight away, Agentforce, love it, what is it? What can it do? And so this is, for us, is a great starter for 10 as well. And we do work with many customers today. There's 3 projects I'm thinking of in particular where customers have bought the agents and bought the licenses for the agents with full ambition to implement them themselves. But then another project has come in with their ERP or one of their legacy systems that they're having to put their development team focused on. So we're in there supporting the implementation of their agents and that design. I think the only thing I would say there in terms of what we're seeing, quite a straightforward process, that 1 to 6 steps, it's well documented on the Salesforce websites. But that key bit, which we're enjoying and certainly our developers are, which is the secret sauce, which Tundi's alluded to there, is the ML piece, the machine learning piece. That's the secret of the data, what the data is going to do, and really that methodology of how that's going to transform your business. So do reach out to us if you want us to design from scratch an agent for you. If you want us to activate one that a Salesforce agent you've already acquired, or indeed sort of semi-design one with you and deploy that, please speak to a member of the team to get started on that. And as Tundi mentioned earlier, we always refer our customers to this, and also a lot of the account execs that we work with at Salesforce. We do have our own PhiX, which is if you go onto Netflix and put in PhiX Technologies, you'll see a lot of our short videos. And not everyone has an hour to have a fully fledged demo, but what we have is we have some bite-sized sort of 4 and 6 minutes, and it shows you all those features around new Revenue Cloud Advanced. So some of the additional questions we've been having in, which I've been monitoring on the call, are what's the difference? Why would I invest in Revenue Cloud Advanced over and above CPQ? The answers are very much there on those little demos. So what is DRO, order orchestration? How would that, it enables you to think, how would that affect my business? What does that mean? In terms of attribute-based configuration, supersizing and super speeding up composition of your products in your B2B environment as well out to customers. So there's some great features there, and customers have said to us it's really good aha moments. So do take a look and spend some time on that. And please link in with us on LinkedIn, because many of these videos, myself, Tundi, the team, spin them up onto LinkedIn and just talk a little bit about them for 3 or 4 minutes to give you context of how to really maximize your investment in the Salesforce platform as well. So I think once more, thanks for spending time with us today. The majority of the work we do here at PhiX is actually customer advisory, which is what I've just spoken about there, specifically around where industry cloud meets revenue cloud, and those from lead to cash efficiencies in your business as well. So we welcome you to connect with us directly. You can reach out to us on the details here, and to support your companies, really extending the ambition within the Salesforce ecosystem and continuing to do, we're here to help. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Michael and Tundi. I know both of you are together in Paris training today, so I suspect you're probably sharing a room as well for this webinar. So a special thank you for joining us both. I know your training was planned after the webinar, so really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.